following video is not made for kids. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello to my subscribers, this is the TFangy coming to you with what will hopefully be a successful video review, and today we're going to be taking a look at what is, for me personally, the last mass retail released deluxe class Transformers figure to be released in the Legacy line. I still have a couple of exclusives that I have to review, and of course this is not the very last Legacy Transformers figure I have to review, but unfortunately by any means I still have a few Legacy Transformers figures to review, such as Leader Class Overcharge, you can see over my shoulder back there. But for tonight's video we're going to be taking a look at, as I said, this is the last mass retail released deluxe class figure to be released on the Legacy banner that I've still had to review, and it is the Transformers Generation 2 version of Breakdown. So yeah, this is Breakdown from the Transformers Generation 2 franchise. There he is inside the box package in his robot mode. There's an image of his alt mode of a mostly teal and eel and purple sports car. You got some artwork here on the side of his box with his robot mode face and his robot mode and his stupid weapon of the sword club, which is done by the racing spoiler from his alt mode. And one thing that some Transformers fans and collectors I know had hoped that Hasbro and Takara Tomy would have done is retooled the racing spoiler so that it would have split in half instead of being just one piece. But unfortunately it is a straight up repaint of the Generation 1 version of Breakdown that was released. That was the very last figure to be released under the Legacy Year 1 banner. Breakdown was released in Easton's packaged with the action figures in Wave 1 of the Legacy Evolution line back in 2023. So yeah, Breakdown and his G1 and then his G2 versions were released in the final wave of mass retail deluxe figures in Legacy Year 1 and Legacy United respectively. So it is somewhat ironic that Breakdown was released in the final wave of 2 parts of the Legacy trilogy. So coming on here to this side of the box, you got half the poster image for the Legacy United line, which being released last year in 2024, celebrated the 40th anniversary of the Transformers franchise. Coming on all the way to the back of the box, you got images of Breakdown in his robot mode and his alt mode, and he is from the Generation 2 banner, so he's got the Generation 2 Decepticon logo painted on the hood of his vehicle mode, and it's the G2 Decepticon faction symbol that's located throughout the box. I can't remember off the top of my head what the Generation 2 Decepticon logo is based on. The Generation 1 Decepticon logo, which is the more well-known Decepticon logo, it's based off of Generation 1 Soundwave's face sculpt, just like the Generation 1 Autobot logo is based off of Generation 1 Prowl, and the G2 Autobot logo is based off Generation 1 Optimus Prime's face. I think the G2 logo might have been based off of Soundwave's appearance in the Transformers comic books. I could be incorrect about that. I probably should look into it. But the G2 Decepticon logo, nevertheless, it is a different style of the Decepticon logo than the Generation 1 version. So for some quick history here on Generation 2 Breakdown. Breakdown's original Transformers Generation 2 action figure, it was not released at mass retail. It instead was released as the first ever exclusive Transformers action figure that was released at what everyone thought would permanently be the official Transformers convention, BotCon, back in 1994. So the fact that that Generation 2 Breakdown was released during the Legacy United line in the year 2024, 30 years later, that's somewhat appropriate. But the original Generation 2 Breakdown action figure, I can't remember how many copies of him were released exclusively at the first ever BotCon convention back in 1994. But because of that, to this day, all the Transformers action figures that were released exclusively at BotCon, which was the official Transformers convention for 22 years from 1994 to 2016 until the license that Hasbro had with Fun Publications, which was the comic book publisher that published the comic books for both BotCon and the Transformers Collectors Club, which is how Hasbro was able to release action figures exclusively, not only at BotCon, but through the Transformers Collectors Club. The license with Fun Publications ran out in 2016, and as a result, the Transformers Collectors Club, I can't remember what year that started, but it, along with BotCon, which had been started in 1994 and had lasted every year for 22 years until 2016. The Collectors Club and BotCon both ended in 2016. BotCon has come back in more recent years, but it's not quite the way it was from 1994 to 2016, when it was in a partnership directly with Hasbro and a comic book publisher, like they had with Fun Publications. But the point of talking about all that is that to this day, all the Transformers action figures that were released exclusively at BotCon every year from 1994 to 2016, today the BotCon exclusive Transformers action figures are considered the rarest and most hard to find Transformers action figures out there. So if anyone is lucky enough to find an original BotCon 1994 exclusive Transformers Generation 2 Breakdown action figure, then you will, if you do find one on the internet, someone selling an unopened mint box G2 Breakdown action figure, you will pay an arm and a leg for that figure due to how rare it is. And another thing that makes Breakdown special is not only was he one of the reasons why he was released exclusively at BotCon is that by 1994 the Generation 2 line of action figures, it wasn't selling as well as Hasbro had hoped, and so starting the following year in 1995, Hasbro started to work in conjunction with Mainframe Entertainment to develop a new Transformers cartoon show based on an entirely new line of Transformers action figures unconnected to Generation 2. It would be an entirely brand new Transformers series, and the result was that by 1996, 2 years after G2 Breakdown's BotCon figure was released, the Transformers Beast Wars series started, and the Beast Wars cartoon blew away Transformers Generation 2. And the result was that, with Hasbro wanting to put focus on unleashing Transformers Beast Wars, the other Generation 2 Stunticons ultimately were cancelled and never got past the production phase. There have been unsold prototype copies of Generation 2 Menasor that have appeared. There are photos of the unreleased prototypes appearing on the internet in more recent years. But Breakdown was the only Stunticon to be given a paint job in the Transformers Generation 2 line, and as far as I am myself am aware of, a Breakdown, his Generation 2 action figure did get a repaint from the Transformers Universe Classics 2008 Deluxe Class Sunstreaker mold that was also used for Sideswipe, and it was used for Punch Counterpunch by the Transformers Collectors Club, and then in the original Generations line in 2010, that mold was also used for Red Alert. But the first time we got a fully completed Transformers Generation 2 version of Menasor wasn't until the Combiner Wars line in 2016. And the point I'm trying to make is that pretty much, as far as I'm aware of, all of the Generation 2 Stunticons that have been released, the ones at BotCon, the Collectors Club, and even Combiner Wars, and even here under the Legacy banner, every Generation 2 Stunticon that's ever been released has been an exclusive. And so, as far as I'm aware of, this right here, the Legacy United Deluxe Class Generation 2 Breakdown, he's the first ever Generation 2 Stunticon to be released at mass retail. So yeah, when it comes to the Generation 2 line, Breakdown is always ahead of his Stunticon teammates in that his original Generation 2 action figure was the only one ever released, granted as a BotCon exclusive in 1994, and he's technically not the first Generation 2 Stunticon to be released in the Legacy line, but he is the first one to be released at mass retail. Also, he is ahead of the other Stunticons in that regard in being the quote-unquote most easily available to find of the Generation 2 Stunticons. For those who missed out on Breakdown when he was released last year in 2024, this past month during December of 2025, the last month of the year after his release, Walmart stores here in the United States bundled deluxe class figures that were released during the Legacy United line and sold them as 2-packs for the Christmas shopping season for 2025, and Generation 2 Breakdown was among the Legacy United deluxe class figures that was sold in holiday bundle 2-packs, in which he was packaged alongside another deluxe figure from the Legacy United line. I can't remember what figures G2 Breakdown was partnered up with, but I believe he was partnered with the figures that were released in the final wave of the Legacy United line alongside him, which were Armada Wheeljack, which I reviewed recently, Origins Bumblebee, which was his first mass retail release since his Target store exclusive Buzzworthy figure was released back in 2021, and also Legacy United Cosmos, a repackage of the former Walmart exclusive Velocitron Speedia 500 Cosmos figure. But yeah, Breakdown was released after his first release at the end of 2024. He was released again at the end of 2025 right now, and so he has been the easiest to obtain of the G2 Stunticons that have been released by Hasbro, unlike his fellow Generation 2 Stunticons. The other Stunticons that have been released from the Legacy trilogy that have been released in their Generation 2 colors have been these two guys right here. G2 Dragstrip, who was released as a Walmart exclusive in the Velocitron Speedia 500 subline. He was released under the new copyrighted name of Shadowstrip, but this is basically the G2 version of Dragstrip, and so Hasbro apparently couldn't get a registered trademark by a mark of applying the G2 before Dragstrip's Generation 1 name, so they decided to just rename him Shadowstrip. And so many Transformers fans and collectors have jokingly debated on whether or not this is Generation 2 Breakdown or if Shadowstrip is an entirely separate Transformers character. And then the other G2 Stunticon to also be released, which, just like Shadowstrip / G2 Dragstrip, this was also released as a Walmart exclusive under the Legacy Evolution Toxitron Collection line. This is Generation 2 Dead End. And so yeah, before Breakdown, the only other G2 Stunticons that we've gotten from the Legacy trilogy were both released as Walmart exclusives here in the United States. It was rumored for a while that this year in 2025, for the Age of the Primes line, that G2 Wildrider might be one of the deluxe figures, either released as an exclusive or at mass retail. But so far, the word from Hasbro is that there hasn't been any word on the last two Stunticons that form Menasor, Wildrider, and Motormaster. There has been no word from Hasbro as to whether or not if the legacy figures of Wildrider and Motormaster will be repainted into their G2 paint jobs. So far, alright. In terms of having a fully completed Transformers Generation 2 version of Legacy Menasor, so far it's not happening. We're only getting 3 of the 5 Stunticons, so the closest that collectors will be able to having a Generation 2 version of Menasor is swapping out the G2 versions of Dragstrip, Dead End, and Breakdown with their G1 versions on Legacy Generation 1 and Menasor. So it is a tad disappointing that we only have 3/5 of G2 Menasor. If there were G2 versions of Wildrider and Motormaster released, then I would buy them to have a fully completed Generation 2 version of Motormaster. The only G2 version of Menasor that I have in my collection, that's what I meant to say a moment ago, Menasor, is the Combiner Wars version that I got back in 2016. I apologize for not bringing out the G2 Stunticons for a comparison here with G2 Breakdown. But there's plenty of photographs of the Combiner Wars G2 version of Menasor, so you can get a look at what he would be like. I don't know if anybody has made any CGI or digibashed or made any fan art of Legacy Menasor in his G2 colors, just to show what G2 Menasor would look like. But I am still grateful that I was able to find G2 Breakdown and get him and add him to my Transformers collection. So without further delay, I babbled on long enough about the history and background information on him, so let's hurry up and get Legacy United G2 Menasor out of his box and take a close look at him in his robot mode. Alright, and so here is Transformers Legacy United G2 Breakdown, transformed out of the box and in his robot mode. I technically have him transformed incorrectly because you're supposed to unclip these parts here and fold them out just to have his backpack sit level behind his head, but that is just ridiculous looking, and I rather prefer to have him transformed incorrectly where the hood is not separated and it's just one piece. So I know that Hit sits up higher behind his back, but then on his original Generation 1 action figure, which the G2 figure is a repaint of, the hood of the car folded backwards and rotated 180 degrees when you transformed Breakdown into his robot mode on his original figure. The Combiner Wars figure does almost the same type of transformation with the front of the car folding back 180 degrees, and so I kind of wish they would have done that here for his Legacy figure. On that note, I am fully aware that Breakdown is a retool of Legacy Wildrider. He's not an original mold, unlike his other Stunticons from the Legacy line. But still, even on that note, I kind of wish the designers at Hasbro and Takatomi would have even designed Wildrider to transform differently. But considering what we got, I'm just glad that they used the mold on G2 Breakdown. And like I said, I really hope they use this mold one more time to make a G2 version of Wildrider. I won't go into the articulation too much since I covered it in my reviews of Legacy Wildrider and Legacy G1 Breakdown. But yeah, here is G2 Breakdown next to his G1 figure, and as you can see, not much of a color difference in terms of the layout. Again, here's the hoods of his vehicle mode, which end up being the robot mode backpack. You got the G2 Decepticon logo on here, and the G1 Decepticon logo on the G1 figure. Pretty much and as I said, the parts on G1 Breakdown that were creamy white, they're now I said teal at the start of the review, but it's actually supposed to be turquoise. Turquoise is the word I was looking for. So yeah, the white parts on G1 Breakdown are now turquoise on G2 Breakdown, and the parts of G1 Breakdown that were navy blue are now purple on G2 Breakdown. Pretty much the only difference in the paint layout is the torso, whereas Breakdown has slightly more navy blue highlights here across his chest and down to his waistline. G2 Breakdown just has the purple paint going down to the waistline, but his pelvis is now painted silver, whereas on G1 Breakdown only the torso was silver, not his pelvis. So yeah, pretty much an even amount of paint job on them. Although G1 Breakdown has slightly more paint apps in the fact that on his wheels, his hubcaps are painted silver, so he has hubcaps and tires, whereas G2 Breakdown, the wheels are unpainted. And with the new turquoise plastic used for him, it's the pegged-on wheels on the back of the vehicle mode really look like some turquoise spots on the back of his wheels. So I've never been a fan of clip-on wheels, so I kind of wish the designers would have designed a different wheel configuration for this mold. Now that I'm looking at him, almost all of the parts on G2 Breakdown that are supposed to be purple are actually purple paint. The paint, just like a G1 Breakdown, where all the navy blue on him on the bottom of his legs is paint, it's the same with G2 Breakdown. The head sculpt, I believe, is sculpted in purple plastic, and now that I look at the head sculpts, I kept saying throughout the review so far that this guy was a straight-up repaint of G1 Breakdown. He is not. They do have different head sculpts on here. The head sculpt used here on G2 Breakdown is the head sculpt that was used on the 5-pack box set of Legacy Menasor, and that version of Breakdown had a different head sculpt from this one. The head sculpt used here for the mass retail individually released G1 Breakdown, I believe this head sculpt is based off of his Generation 1 action figure, and then the new head sculpt that was first used on the gift set version of Breakdown, and it's now used here on G2 Breakdown. This head sculpt is based on his appearance in the G1 cartoon, although I could be wrong, it could be the other way. But yeah, with the new head sculpt here, he's the G2 version of Legacy United Breakdown. It's not a straight-up repaint of Legacy Year 1 on Breakdown. And so, yeah, for those who didn't get the Legacy Menasor box set, gift set 5-pack, which had the G1 cartoon head sculpts for the Stunticons. And then, between these versions of Breakdown, they have different head sculpts on them, so that's pretty nice to see that they aren't straight-up repaints of each other. And yeah, I kind of wish that the racing spoiler did split in half, so instead of him holding it as like a dagger-type weapon, you could just leave them attached to the back of his legs when you have him transformed in robot mode. But since that's the biggest gripe I have with this figure, I am thrilled with how Generation 2 Breakdown turned out. I apologize, I won't be doing robot mode comparisons with the G2 versions of Dead End and Dragstrip, but I will compare them in alt mode in just a moment, so let's hurry up and get Generation 2 Legacy United Breakdown transformed into his alt mode, and we will wrap up the review. Alright, and so here is Legacy United G2 Breakdown transformed into his alt mode of a mostly turquoise Lamborghini. The reason why I'm using quotation marks is because the alt mode for this mold, it's basically a hybrid of G1 Wildrider's alt mode and G1 Breakdown's alternate mode, so it's not entirely a Lamborghini, it's a mashup of a Lamborghini, and I forgot the vehicle that Wildrider transforms into, if it's the same one as G1 Jazz or G1 Windcharger. I should have looked that up before I started recording this review, but anyways, here is G2 Breakdown in his alt mode, and again, the G2 Decepticon logo is here on the hood of his vehicle mode, and the logo itself is actually the same unpainted turquoise plastic used on the rest of them, so it's actually the outline of the logo that's painted with the black paint used on the hood of the vehicle mode. One thing I like that they did is, just like the gift set version of G1 Breakdown that was sold in the Menasor 5-pack, is they painted the windows here on the sides of the vehicle mode to at least make it look more like a Lamborghini, which they didn't do with the mass retail version of G1 Breakdown. So yeah, here they are compared to each other. Because the laser guns store right underneath the bottom of the alt mode, unlike his fellow Legacy Stunticons, Breakdown is able to be more of a robot in disguise than his Stunticon teammates, since he doesn't have any weapons just hanging off the back of him. Some fans and collectors didn't like that it made him less cohesive compared to his Stunticon teammates not having visible weapons, which having the weapon on his back, on the top back section of his alt mode, that's something that his Generation 1 action figure did. His Combiner Wars figure does something similar. But I actually enjoy it because it helps Breakdown be a robot in disguise. And as I said, the layout of Breakdown's paint job, comparing his G1 and G2 figures next to each other, they're pretty much the same paint jobs. The parts that were white on this one are now turquoise on this one. The parts that were navy blue on here are now purple on here. So, there's no paint apps on the headlights or tail lights on the front and back sides of the vehicles. Those are pretty much the additional paint apps in alt mode, comparing G2 Breakdown with G1 on Breakdown is the additional three window panel sections here on the side of the alt mode. I do enjoy that additional paint app on the windows because it makes the vehicle mode look more like a Lamborghini, and it helps to further distinguish Breakdown from Wildrider. And again, on mentioning Wildrider right here, as I said, so far there's been no word from Hasbro on Legacy Wildrider being done in his G2 paint job. So when it comes to the Legacy G2 Stunticons, the only ones that Hasbro has planned on releasing so far are the three that we've gotten: Dragstrip, Dead End, and of course Breakdown now. So there's no word yet on if we're going to get G2 versions of Legacy Wildrider and Motormaster. But I really hope that we do, so we can have a fully completed Generation 2 version of Legacy Menasor. So there's Legacy United Breakdown next to his G2 Stunticon teammates. I'll put him in the center since he's the focus of this video. So yeah, here he is next to Dead End and Dragstrip, who were both released exclusively at Walmart stores here in the United States during the Legacy trilogy. And Dragstrip was apparently Hasbro couldn't get a registered trademark on the name G2 Dragstrip, so Dragstrip was renamed Shadowstrip when his figure was released. But yeah, Legacy Shadowstrip is by all accounts Generation 2 Dragstrip. So yeah, here is Breakdown next to his fellow Stunticons, and I personally find it very ironic that of the three Legacy G2 Stunticons that Hasbro released. Breakdown's the only one that was released at mass retail. The others were released as exclusives. It is better than their original Generation 2 action figures, in which Breakdown was the only one released exclusively at BotCon, while Dragstrip, Dead End, along with Wildrider and Motormaster were never released at all. And even their Combiner Wars action figures were released as exclusives. They weren't released at mass retail. But yeah, but I still enjoy that we at least got 3/5 of G2 Menasor and the G2 Stunticons here in the Legacy line. So for my final thoughts, do I recommend getting the Transformers Generation 2 version of Breakdown and adding him to your Transformers collection? If you understand the history of him, the uniqueness of, and the background behind Generation 2 Breakdown, and how he was the only original Generation 2 Stunticon that was released exclusively at BotCon back in 1994, then I do highly recommend getting him. If you aren't really a fan of the Legacy Wildrider mold, and you're not really a fan of Breakdown having his G2 paint job of mostly turquoise and purple, and you prefer his G1 paint job of mostly white with navy blue, then he can be an easy pass. But when you understand the history behind him, the uniqueness of how the G2 Stunticons have always been, and G2 Menasor have always been given the short stick, and how the only completed version of G2 Menasor that Hasbro has ever released to Transformers fans and collectors has so far been the Combiner Wars version, then yeah, I do highly recommend getting G2 Breakdown. As I said, because he's the only one of the 3 Legacy versions of the G2 Stunticon that's been released at mass retail, he is, by all accounts, the easiest to find, since he wasn't released as an exclusive here in the United States, unlike Dead End and Dragstrip, who were both released exclusively at Walmart stores here in the US. But yeah, I do highly recommend getting Breakdown if you know all the background information, the history behind him and the original G2 version of Breakdown being the first ever BotCon figure. Then I do highly recommend getting this figure as a standalone Transformers figure. What he has going for him is the paint job to distinguish him from G1 Breakdown, and of course the Legacy version of Breakdown is because he's mold mates with Wildrider, he's not too unique compared to his fellow Stunticons. Breakdown's the only Legacy Stunticon that was not an entirely original mold and was a repaint / retool of a previously released figure, the previously released figure being Legacy Wildrider. But yeah, I do highly recommend getting him if you're a fan of the Stunticons. If you're not, then as a standalone figure, if you aren't a fan of turquoise with purple highlights, then Breakdown can be an easy pass, but overall, I do highly recommend getting him if you can. So thank you guys all so much for watching. This has been the TF Geek. This has been my review of Transformers Legacy United Deluxe Class G2 Breakdown. With his release, we now have 3/5 of G2 Legacy Menasor that have been released by Hasbro. So far, as I said throughout this review, Hasbro currently has no plans on releasing the G2 versions of Wildrider and Motormaster, so having a fully completed Legacy version of G2 Menasor, it's long off. It's not happening anytime soon. But hopefully someday we will finally get G2 versions of Legacy Wildrider and Motormaster and have a fully completed G2 version of Menasor. But until that day comes, I am glad that we got Breakdown, Dead End, and Dragstrip in their G2 colors for the others in the meantime. So thank you guys all so much once again. Until next time, you guys, this has been the TF Geek. Please remember to stay safe, stay healthy. I am almost at 1,000 subscribers, so if you guys could please help me get more subs in, I'd love to finally hit 1,000. So until next time, you guys, transform and roll out. Goodbye, everyone.